Have you ever wondered what drives a person to commit the unthinkable? Some crimes don't just take lives, they leave scars on history itself. Here are top 10 murders that will leave you speechless. 10. The murder of Laci Peterson in California, USA, 2002. At Modesto, California, in December 2002. It was just before Christmas when a young woman named Laci Peterson went missing. She was 27 years old, 8 months pregnant, and seemed to have a happy life ahead of her. The whole community was shocked, a young mother to be simply vanished without a trace, and in the holiday season when families were supposed to be celebrating. People involved and what really happened. Laci was married to Scott Peterson, a 30-year-old man who worked in fertilizer sales. At first, Scott appeared to be the grieving husband. He told police that on the morning of December 24th, he had gone fishing at a nearby marina while his wife stayed home to walk the dog. But suspicions grew quickly. Neighbors found Laci's dog wandering outside with its leash still attached. Something was clearly wrong. Laci herself was nowhere to be found. In the days that followed, the search for Laci grew into a nationwide media storm. Volunteers, helicopters, and even celebrities joined in. But the more Scott appeared on television, the more people noticed his strangely calm behavior. Instead of being emotional or desperate, he seemed distant, even cold. Then came the shocking discovery. Scott was having an affair with a woman named Amber Fry. Amber had no idea Scott was married, let alone that his wife was missing. When she found out, she went straight to the police and agreed to help. She even recorded her phone calls with Scott. While the world was searching for Laci, Scott was calling Amber, pretending he was spending the holidays alone in Europe. The lies only deepened suspicion. How police got the information and the outcome after investigation. The investigation focused on Scott's fishing trip. Police discovered he had been at the San Francisco Bay that morning. Months later, in April 2003, the bodies of Laci and her unborn son, Connor, washed ashore not far from where Scott claimed to have been fishing. The condition of the bodies suggested they had been in the water for months. When police arrested Scott, they found him carrying large amounts of cash, his brother's ID, camping gear, and even maps of Mexico. Many believed he was preparing to flee. At trial, the evidence painted him as a man who wanted freedom from his marriage and fatherhood, and who planned to start a new life with Amber. In 2004, Scott Peterson was convicted of first-degree murder for killing Laci and second-degree murder for killing their unborn son. He was sentenced to death. 4 years, he remained on death row at San Quentin prison. But in 2020, California's Supreme Court overturned his death sentence, citing issues with jury selection. However, his murder conviction still stands, and he remains in prison serving life without parole. The Laci Peterson case is terrifying not just because of the crime itself, but because of the betrayal behind it. 9. The murder of Junko Furuta's successor, Japan, 2000. In Japan, stories of cruelty rarely escape the news cycle, but in the year 2000, one case left people frozen with disbelief. It was called the "Girl in the Concrete" case, and while the original horror happened in the late 1980s, a chilling echo came in 2000 when another young woman faced almost the same fate. Her name was Mori Kono, a shy 17-year-old high school girl living in Saitama Prefecture. Mori lived with her parents, attended school regularly, and dreamed of working in fashion one day. But one night in March 2000, she never made it home. Instead, she crossed paths with two men who had already been wandering the streets, hunting for trouble. They lured her into their car, and in a matter of hours, she disappeared from the safe world of teenage dreams into a nightmare of captivity. The men, both in their 20s, held Mori inside an apartment. Over the following weeks, she was subjected to abuse so extreme that the media would later withhold some details from the public. The neighbors, shockingly, had suspicions something was wrong, strange noises, cries at odd hours, but no one spoke up. It was the kind of silence that gives birth to tragedy. Mori's body was eventually found encased in a concrete drum. The image of that discovery spread through Japan like wildfire. It was hauntingly similar to the infamous Junko Furuta case from 1988, where another teenage girl had been tortured and left in concrete. People were horrified. How could the same type of cruelty strike again, in the same country, only years apart? The police were tipped off when one of the men involved began bragging to acquaintances about what he had done. The arrogance was unbelievable, as if he had committed something so cruel that even prison would not matter. Those whispers reached the ears of detectives, and an investigation was quickly launched. When they tracked the men down, the trail led directly to the sealed drum that contained Mori's remains. In court, the men admitted their crimes, but their lack of remorse disturbed everyone. They were given life sentences, but many in Japan argued that such a punishment was far too lenient. The courtroom was filled with Mori's grieving parents, who couldn't understand how someone could take their daughter's life in such a senseless, brutal way. The story spread beyond Japan, leaving people around the world shaken. Some crimes feel like they could only happen once in history, but here was a cruel repetition. Parents began to warn their children not just about strangers in the night, but about the ordinary silence of neighbors who looked the other way. What frightened people most wasn't only the murder itself, but the eerie reminder: cruelty doesn't vanish from the world just because we wish it away. Sometimes, it returns in the same form, almost like a shadow that refuses to fade. 8. The Watts family murders, Colorado, USA 2018. In the summer of 2018, a quiet town in Frederick, Colorado woke up to news that a young mother and her 2 little daughters had disappeared. The mother was Shannon Watts, 34 years old, who was 15 weeks pregnant with a baby boy. Her husband Chris Watts told everyone that he had no idea where they went. At first he stood on television pleading for their safe return. He looked calm and even gave long interviews while his neighbors searched in panic. But something felt wrong. Shannon's close friend Nicole was the first to raise the alarm. Shannon had missed a doctor's appointment and that was unusual. Nicole drove to the Watts home and found Shannon's car still in the garage, her purse and phone left behind. It made no sense. Nicole called the police and that moment started one of the most disturbing investigations in recent history. Police arrived and began asking Chris questions. He repeated the same story, that he had left for work early and did not know what happened after. He said maybe Shannon had taken the girls somewhere. But detectives noticed how relaxed he looked. He was not crying, not desperate, only speaking like nothing serious had happened. Very quickly the case took a darker turn. Investigators searched the home and found signs of struggle. They also learned that Chris was having an affair with a coworker. The affair painted a picture of a man who wanted to escape his family life. The turning point came when Chris was asked to take a polygraph test. Before the test began, the examiner told him directly that he should not bother lying because they would know. Chris agreed to take it, but he failed badly. He said maybe Shannon had taken the girls somewhere. But detectives noticed how relaxed he looked. He was not crying, not desperate, only speaking like nothing serious had happened. When detectives pressed harder, Chris finally admitted the truth. He had killed Shannon after an argument. Then he smothered his daughters Bella and Celeste and put their bodies in oil tanks where he worked. He buried Shannon in a shallow grave nearby. The community was stunned. People who knew the family described them as perfect. Shannon was known for posting videos online showing her daughters laughing, dancing, and smiling with their father. To see Chris calmly destroy all of that was unthinkable. The outcome was swift. In November 2018, Chris Watts was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He avoided the death penalty only because Shannon's family did not want it. They chose to let him spend his life behind bars instead. What people could not shake off was the coldness of it all. A man who lived under the same roof, shared meals, smiled for family photos, and tucked his children into bed could turn into their killer without warning. It reminded everyone that true danger is not always outside the home. Sometimes it is standing in the kitchen with you, smiling as if nothing is wrong. 7. The murder of Meredith Culture, Perugia, Italy 2007. In November 2007, the historic town of Perugia in Italy became the center of a mystery that made headlines around the world. Meredith Culture, a 21-year-old student from England, was found dead in the house she shared with other students. She had been studying abroad and was known as cheerful and kind. The night she died, she had stayed home while her American roommate Amanda Knox went to spend time with her boyfriend Raphael Solicito. When police entered the house, they found Meredith's room locked. Inside, they discovered her body covered with a blanket. She had been stabbed multiple times and there were signs of a violent struggle. At first, the investigation pointed directly at Amanda Knox and Raphael. Amanda gave confused statements and the Italian police believed she was hiding something. The press quickly painted her as the Foxy Knoxy character, a young woman living a double life. Raphael too was accused of helping her. Both were arrested and questioned for days. But the truth was not so simple. Evidence at the crime scene showed that a man named Rudy Gill, who had a history of break-ins, was the one who attacked Meredith. His DNA was found on her body and his bloody handprints were on the wall. He later admitted he was in the house but claimed he did not kill her. Even with this strong evidence against Gill, the Italian court still tried Amanda and Raphael for murder. Their trial dragged on for years with convictions, appeals, and retrials. The media circus around them turned the case into a global drama. Were they innocent students caught in a nightmare, or killers pretending to be victims? In 2011, Amanda and Raphael were released after their convictions were overturned. In 2015, Italy's highest court fully acquitted them, saying there was simply no proof they were involved. Rudy Gill was sentenced to 16 years for the murder and served most of it before being released in 2021. For many people, the case was terrifying not just because of Meredith's tragic death but because of how quickly suspicion can turn against the wrong people. Amanda once said in court, "I am paying with my life for things I did not do." And that became the haunting lesson. Sometimes the truth can be buried under fear, gossip, and media headlines. What stayed with the world was how fragile safety can feel. Meredith was a student chasing her dreams abroad, and yet danger came not from the streets but from someone who forced his way into her own home. 6. The Alo 4 lynching, Port Harcourt, Nigeria 2012. In October 2012, Nigeria woke up to one of the most disturbing crimes ever caught on video. 4 young university students from the University of Port Harcourt were accused of stealing. Their names were Loy Toku, Tikina Elkona, Ugana Abuser, and Chiadika Byringa. They were not hardened criminals. They were ordinary students in their early 20s trying to get an education. That morning they went to Alo community, a small area near their campus, to confront a man who owed them money. Instead of settling the matter peacefully, things turned against them. Someone shouted that they were thieves. In that moment the whole community turned into a mob. Within minutes the 4 boys were stripped naked, beaten with sticks, stoned with concrete blocks, and finally set on fire. What made it more horrifying was that dozens of people stood around watching. Some recorded the scene with their phones. Not a single person stepped forward to stop it. The crowd believed they were teaching thieves a lesson, but what they really did was murder 4 innocent students in cold blood. When the video began to spread online, Nigerians could not believe their eyes. Parents cried as they watched the footage of young men the same age as their children being killed in broad daylight. The government came under heavy pressure to act. Police began an investigation and arrested many members of the Alu community. In court the story became clear. The boys were not thieves at all. They had gone to ask for their money back and were trapped in a misunderstanding that exploded into mob justice. In 2017, after a long trial, the Rivers State High Court sentenced 3 men to death by hanging for their role in the killings. Several others were sentenced to life imprisonment. Even with these punishments, the story of the Alu 4 continues to haunt Nigeria. People still ask how an entire community could allow such horror to happen without anyone stepping in. Many Nigerians began to see how dangerous mob justice is. Rumor and anger can turn neighbors into killers in just a few minutes. The lesson that stayed was simple but heavy. When law breaks down and people take justice into their own hands, innocence is the first victim. Those 4 students left home that day never knowing that suspicion and fear would end their lives before sunset. And for many families across Africa it became a warning that silence in the face of violence is the same as joining in. 5. The Kosoa ritual murder. In April 2021, the peaceful town of Kosoa in Ghana became the center of a story that shocked the whole country. A 10-year-old boy named Ishmael Mensah was playing outside near his house when 2 teenage boys, only 16 and 18 years old, lured him away. These boys were not strangers. They were his friends from the same neighborhood. What happened next revealed one of the darkest sides of modern desperation. The teenagers had been following online stories and fake spiritualists who promised quick wealth through rituals. They were told that if they sacrificed a child and took the body parts to a fetish priest, they would receive riches beyond their imagination. In their young minds they believed this was the only way to escape poverty. So on that day they tricked Ishmael into coming to an unfinished building. Once inside they attacked him with a shovel. The little boy cried and begged, but they did not stop. They killed him and buried his body in a shallow grave right there. Their plan was to take his body parts to a spiritualist for money rituals. But secrets do not stay hidden for long. Ishmael's family quickly realized he was missing. The community began searching for him and someone reported seeing the 2 boys leading him away. The police were alerted and when they arrested the teenagers, they confessed. They even showed officers where they had buried Ishmael's body. The news spread like wildfire across Ghana. People could not believe that boys so young could carry out such an evil act against someone they called a friend. Parents were terrified, wondering what kind of influence was pushing children into ritual killings. Radio stations and television programs discussed it for weeks. Clergy members, chiefs, and community leaders all condemned the act, calling it a sign of moral decay. In court the teenagers admitted that they wanted money and believed ritual sacrifice was the fastest way. The police traced the spiritualist who had encouraged them and investigations widened into how many others were being misled by such practice. The case was still fresh but it forced the whole nation to face a bitter truth. In the search for quick riches, some young people were ready to trade human life. The memory of little Ishmael became a warning to families across Ghana and Africa. The real danger was not only poverty but the lies that prey on desperate hearts. If 2 teenagers could destroy a life for the promise of money, then the community itself had to ask where the teachings had failed. For many parents the story changed how they watched over their children. They began to speak more openly about the dangers of so-called ritual money and the fake promises that come with it. Because the saddest part was that Ishmael was only playing close to home, safe in his own world, until trust in friends led him into darkness. 4. The child sacrifice cases. Uganda 2010. In Uganda the year 2010 opened the eyes of the world to a crime many thought belonged to ancient times. It was the crime of child sacrifice. Families had been whispering about it for years but few believed it was real until police began to uncover case after case. One of the most chilling stories happened near Kampala when a 7-year-old boy named Stephen disappeared while walking to school. His parents searched the whole village but he was nowhere to be found. Days later police discovered his body buried in a shallow pit on the land of a wealthy businessman. His head and genitals were missing. The investigation revealed that a witch doctor had convinced the man that sacrificing a child would bring him wealth and protection in his business. This was not an isolated case. In rural and urban areas alike, children were being targeted by people desperate for money and success. Police formed a special task force after realizing the crime was spreading fast. They found that some witch doctors were advertising their services openly, telling clients that child sacrifice was the strongest ritual for quick wealth. The public was horrified when reports showed that even parents were sometimes involved in handing over their own children. One father admitted he gave his daughter to a witch doctor because he believed it would lift his family out of poverty. The girl's small shoes were later found at a shrine. The government of Uganda, under President Yoweri Museveni, had to respond. Laws were passed making ritual sacrifice punishable by death. NGOs and churches joined forces to protect children and to spread awareness in schools and villages. Yet the fear remained. Many parents began walking their children to school instead of letting them go alone. Communities created watch groups at night. What scared people the most was how the crime mixed old beliefs with modern greed. Mobile phones, advertising, and quick money culture gave new life to rituals that should have died long ago. And children, the most innocent, became the easiest victims. One Ugandan police officer said in an interview, "The real battle is not just in the courts but in the minds of people. As long as they believe wealth comes from blood, children will remain in danger." His words stayed with the country like a shadow. The story of Stephen and many others like him became a warning across Africa. Danger is not always in the wild or in strangers from far away. Sometimes it is right inside the neighborhood dressed as tradition. And if communities stay silent, children remain the prize. 3. The murder of River Steenkamp, South Africa 2013. In the early hours of Valentine's Day 2013, South Africa woke up to a story that seemed too unreal to believe. Oscar Pistorius, the famous Paralympic runner known around the world as the Blade Runner, had shot and killed his girlfriend River Steenkamp inside his home in Pretoria. Oscar was not just any athlete. He was a national hero, a man who had overcome disability to compete against able-bodied runners on the biggest stages of sport. River was a beautiful and rising model, loved for her kindness and charm. Together they looked like a golden couple. But what happened that night tore apart that image forever. Oscar claimed that he had woken in the night and thought there was an intruder hiding in the bathroom. He took his gun and fired 4 shots through the locked bathroom door. Only after firing did he realize River was inside. She died instantly from the gunshots. The police were called and the story spread like fire across South Africa. Many did not believe Oscar's version. Neighbors told investigators they had heard screaming before the shots. Prosecutors argued that Oscar and River had been fighting and that he fired in anger, not fear. The case divided the country. Some believed Oscar's tears and thought it was a tragic mistake. Others saw it as the crime of a jealous man who could not control his rage. The courtroom became the center of the world's attention. Every word and every photograph was broadcast live. South Africans sat glued to their televisions, watching a man once praised as an inspiration now standing in the dock as a killer. River's family sat silently, holding her picture, reminding the world that behind the drama was a young woman whose life had been stolen. In 2014, the judge found Oscar guilty of culpable homicide, which is similar to manslaughter. But prosecutors appealed, arguing it should be murder. In 2015, the Supreme Court agreed and changed the verdict to murder. By 2017, he was sentenced to 13 years in prison. The tragedy of River Steenkamp's death left South Africans shaken. It showed how even heroes could have dark shadows behind closed doors. Many began to talk openly about gender-based violence, a problem already too common in the country. River became a symbol of the countless women who had died at the hands of men they trusted. The lesson was bitter. Fame, wealth, or talent cannot protect anyone from the truth that violence at home destroys lives. And what makes it scarier is that often the danger comes not from strangers but from those closest to us. 2. The murder of Kenneka Ochoa, Nigeria 2019. In 2019, Nigeria was shaken by the strange and brutal murder of a young woman named Kenneka Ochoa in Abuja. She was only 22 years old, a university graduate with big dreams. Her life was just beginning when she suddenly disappeared after telling her family she was going out with friends. 2 days later, her body was discovered in an abandoned building on the outskirts of the city. The scene was horrifying. Parts of her body were missing and her blood had been drained. Police who arrived first could hardly believe what they were seeing. It looked less like a normal murder and more like a ritual sacrifice. Investigations revealed that Kenneka had been lured by people she trusted. One of them was even someone she considered a close friend. They promised her a job opportunity, but instead, they handed her over to a group that specialized in ritual killings. In Nigeria, these groups are called money ritual gangs. They believe that by using human blood or body parts in charms, they can gain quick wealth, political power, or protection. When the story broke, it spread across Nigeria like wildfire. Social media filled with anger, sadness, and fear. Parents began warning their daughters not to go out alone and not to trust sudden promises of jobs or money. Activists protested, demanding that the government crack down on ritual killings that were becoming far too common in different parts of the country. The police managed to arrest some suspects. During interrogation, they confessed that Kenneka had been targeted because she was young, beautiful, and educated, which according to their twisted beliefs made her spirit more powerful for sacrifice. The public was horrified by how calmly they explained their actions, as if a human life was nothing more than a tool for their greed. In court, the killers showed no real remorse. They were sentenced to death, but the pain of Kenneka's family remained. Her mother fainted in the courtroom when the details of what was done to her daughter were read aloud. Her father spoke quietly to reporters, saying, "My daughter wanted to live. She wanted to work. She wanted to be somebody. And they killed her because of lies about wealth." What disturbed Nigerians the most was the idea that in the 21st century such beliefs still had a strong hold on some people. It was not poverty alone, but greed and a thirst for power that fueled these crimes. Communities began to question who among them might be secretly involved in rituals. Fear mixed with suspicion, and trust became harder to find. The murder of Kenneka stood as a dark reminder that human sacrifice was not just a tale from the past. It was still happening in modern cities, against ordinary people. The scariest part was that anyone could be a target, chosen not because of what they did but because of what someone else wanted. Now we arrive at number 1. But here's the twist, I cannot give you a single crime as the worst. Why? Because every time I search, another story surfaces, darker than the last. Africa alone holds countless cases, ritual murders, mysterious disappearances, whole families wiped out in ways that leave no answers. Which one of these is truly number 1? That's not for me to decide. It's for you. Some of you have heard whispers in your towns. Some have read stories in the local papers. Crimes that sounded too cruel to be real, yet they happened. So tell me, which one should stand at the very top of this list? Drop it in the comments. I'll dig into it, investigate, and bring it in my next video. If you don't subscribe now, you may never hear that story. And then, who knows, you might always wonder if the crime you know was the true number 1. Subscribe today.